Hello and welcome to What's Your Story? I have another exciting guest for you today. This one is really fun. Mr. Tony Pereira. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for having me on board.
I'm glad to have you here. And the reason I wanted to have him on is I wanted you to see how sometimes we transition from one career to another career. We might not think it's a career when we make the transition. We might just think it's a hobby. But you've done amazing things with both of your careers, maybe even more than two, but with the two that I know about. So you were a big-time executive with that company that talks about performance and 360-degree. What was that company exactly?
My former company was Accenture. Mm-hmm. So I worked for Accenture from March of 1998 to February 2017, and I ran our at the end. When I finally retired, I was running our operations in North and South America. So our outsourcing operations. So when you talk about the 360, today that's the new thing that Julie Sweet is talking about, which is, of course is having accountability all the way around. You know, from the old days, instead of just paying fees, not only is the company on the hook for getting high performance, but also whoever your partners are to help you.
Yes,
so that's what that's about.
So as a leader, how do you build a high-performance team? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that would like to do that, but you did it.
Yeah, well, I like to think I did. If we go by the numbers and everything else, I would say that the fact that I didn't get fired, I guess, just showed that we did do it. So I always joke about that because when you're a managing director at Accenture, every year you have a target on your back. Mm-hmm. So if you survive for 1 year or the other and actually walk out under your own steam, it's pretty interesting. But getting to your question, I think when you're building high performance teams, you really want to find people that excel probably in areas where you don't. Mm. So I think that's number one. I think shoring up your weaknesses, showing up where they're really strong, I think is one. I think number two is managing your folks by goals, not by tasks. I've always just tell people, new managers, that when you're coming on board is like, you're there. If I give you tasks, you're always coming to me for more. Right. You're never, but if I give you a responsibility, you're never done. So responsibility with outcomes that they're going to be measured. That's how you can get the most out of them. And then what they do is come to you for coaching, for advice, removing obstacles. And those are the things you should be doing as a senior level executive. Yes. You shouldn't be micromanaging, and you should be letting those personalities come out.
Yes, exactly. Well, what quality do you feel is most essential for workers and for leaders?
Integrity.
Integrity,
absolutely. You tell them what you're going to do and you do it, and you manage the expectations along the way. Too often I've seen where people try to hide things. They don't want to give bad news, what they perceive to be bad news. Those things hurt you. And you have to also be very willing to expose when you've done something wrong too. And that's all part of integrity. Because if you can go to a client or to anybody and tell them where you've made a mistake and you need to change direction, then they'll believe you when you say things are on course.
Yes.
And I think, so to me, integrity is the thing you need to build, and then everything else comes. And when they can trust you, and they know they can trust you, and sometimes you'll give them information that's detrimental to yourself. Yes. And you just have to do that.
Yes. What part does attitude play in all that?
So, I think quite a bit. I mean, I think always have it. When I say attitude, are you talking about whether it's positive, negative, that kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I think what you need to do is really not so much think in terms of right, wrong, good, bad, hot, cold, any of those things. You have to think in those, because those are very subjective terms, right? So I think at the end of the day, you've got to be objective. Is, for instance, if you're saying that, that my goal is going to be that we're going to have a 15% decrease in attrition, as an example, it's not good or bad. It just is. It's a number, and then you can say whether you achieved your objective, which is hitting the 15%, or you exceeded your objective, which you've lowered the attrition even better. And I think if you think in those terms, you get rid of the agita, as we say, right? Is because you're not stressing over the things that are intangible. You want to not so much stress, but you want to hit your targets. And if you know what your targets are, then it's not somebody interpreting whether you did a good or a bad job based on feeling. It's based on an objective measurement.
Right.
And I think that drives. I think that pushes away If I stay goal focused and goal oriented, then I don't get that stress of, am I doing a good job? Am I doing, you know, you're doing a good job. You know what you perceive to be a good job is, am I hitting my goal or not? You should be thinking that way.
Yes.
Not, am I doing a good job or not?
Right. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I haven't heard somebody talk about attitude that way before, but yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
You have to remove the emotion.
Yeah. I
And
like that.
the emotion gets in the way. The emotion gets in the way. It's I learned a great lesson. I spent 3.5 years in Asia. You know, and my first assignment was in China, and it's a silly thing, right? But you know, when you're talking about running, you know, the room was hot or cold. Mm-hmm. It isn't. It's 72 degrees, or it's 73 degrees, or it's 74 degrees. What you think is cold, I might think is too warm. What I think is too warm, you think is too cold. It doesn't matter, but we'll both agree what 72 feels like.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, how do you maintain work-life balance?
I think of the world, and I think of life as a bunch of volume meters. I'll take it back to the music for a little bit, but is that when you watch a volume meter in a recording studio, you'll see them all bouncing, right? And I think your life is like that. You know, you've got your work life, your personal, you know, your family life, your personal life, your friends, your music, your whatever your hobbies are, things like that. And I think what you have to do is, you can't place an importance on any more than one than in another. I think that's the issue with a lot of folks. A lot of people get very wrapped up in work, and it defines them.
Yes.
And then what happens is, when the work is over, they're lost. I had a couple of people call me after they retired after me, and they said to me, "How did you deal with it for 6 months?" For 6 months, I was depressed. And I'm like, really? The door hit me on the way out. I mean, you know, I was depressed 6 months before I left, not after I left. And they were sitting there, and you hear but what happens? They were very wrapped up. The job identified them. You know, there's a very sad story.
A lot of people are that way.
Like I said, there's a very sad story. There's an NYPD chief who mandatory retirement in the New York Police Department is 62, regardless of rank. So there was a 3-star chief, 62 years old, had to get out of the job. 6 months later, he committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And he was so wrapped up, and you know, and maybe there's other factors. The point is that you can't get so wrapped up in any one thing, because if it goes south on you, you could be severely depressed.
Exactly.
So maintaining work-life balance is understanding that, you know, the job is just a chapter in your life. A lot of things are chapters. Family is important. That doesn't go away. So if you're going to put some stress on yourself, put some stress on yourself in terms of family, your relationships, those kinds of things that you want to truly maintain and make a big difference. The job, you know, you serve at their pleasure.
Yes. Yes.
Even if you are the owner, you serve at somebody's pleasure. And you have to understand that. And when you understand that, it makes the life a lot easier. And then the rest of it is, what is your ultimate goal while you're working? My ultimate goal when I was working was financial independence. And then along the way, I wanted interesting work, which led to the financial. But it was interesting work. But at the end of it, I wanted to get out at a fairly young age so I could do other things.
Yes. Like music.
Like music. Like that segue? How'd you like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're quite the musician. So how did you transition from the corporate world into the music world?
So it gets back to that thing about having many things going on. So there wasn't a hard it wasn't like I threw a switch. So I've been playing guitar since 1969. And along the way, I had great teachers. Professionals, High White, who was with the CBS Orchestra with Ed Sullivan, Sal Salvador, who was with Stan Kenton. Yeah, then he introduces me to Joe Puma, who was with Billie Holiday, and then I get to meet Bucky Pizzarelli, and all these guys, you know, who played with Benny Goodman, played with everybody, his son John, and so you kind of get in the club a little bit, and because you're not signing up to these guys to get work, they're very open to teach you things, because they knew I had a job.
Yeah.
So they knew I wasn't sitting around and liking them because I needed anything. I just enjoyed their company. They taught me things. So I always played. So it was more about, you know, did I spend more time at Accenture, or did I spend less time playing? It was more of an ooze, as I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I oozed over into doing what I do today. And what I do today is I play the music. I have been still called to do some consulting of my old days. But it's more of now, my focus is more this way towards the music and less towards the corporate side now.
I see.
So it's an ooze.
An ooze.
That's what I call it.
I like that. You oozed into it. we have one of your tapes of your music. Can we take a look at that? Would you like to show it to the world?
Yeah, let me introduce that one. So we did a couple of weeks ago, and Pamela, my wife, who's sitting across over there, off camera, is our video person, and she shot this, and we recorded it. And I tend to play a lot with this one bass player, John Bell's guy. This particular cut is one of my favorite ways to play. It's just guitar and bass, and we're doing Gingy, which is a favorite of Pamela's, which is a Joe Beam tune. But John Bell's guy is probably one of the best bass players we have here in Vegas, and super nice guy too, and a great player. And anytime I can do anything, he's the guy I grab. So that's what we're going to listen to is Gingy.
Okay, great. Well, let's take a look. Wow, that was really good.
Thank you very much.
Really good.
Glad you enjoyed
I
it.
love that kind of music. It's soothing to my soul.
Well, Jobim, you can't go wrong. And it, when Astrid Gilberto just died recently, who did "Girl from Ipanema," who made it famous, right? And, and your viewers can maybe catch her on YouTube and see there's a lot of concerts that are out there. But Jobim, great
The
music,
best,
great
huh?
music.
The best. Well, you guys are good.
Thank you, thank
You're
you.
good. Now, are you playing in venues or now? Are you?
Yeah, we've done we've done Maxon's about a half dozen times, and I had Lisa Gay as our singer for that. I've got I wind up doing other things like as you know with Nelson Sardelli at the Club Fiore, being Gary Anderson's band there, and be doing the big band with them on another event. So I do my freelancing, and I've got a few gigs here. I did a TV show last week, so I was a musical director on that. So it's like I get my bits and pieces. I pick and choose. It's the beauty of the ooze, as we talked about, right? The beauty of the ooze is I don't have to take every single thing, every call that comes up. There's a lot of things I would defer to other people,
Yeah.
that are better suited, and things like that. So yeah, so
Maybe not better, but better suited.
Well,
Better.
no, I mean, it's okay to say that because I do believe that people have everybody like in business and everything else, people have their strengths. You got guys out there that do great country western. More of every genre is a specialty. And if somebody calls me for country western, there's about 3 other people I could probably recommend that would be better suited for that job.
What advice would you give to people who are moving through a transition?
Moving through transition.
Yeah, from like they're ready to retire to do something else.
Yeah, I think. So I think it's a two-part answer on that one because I do think that there's some prep that needs to go before that. So it's like everything else. When you like martial arts, I've got an 8th degree black belt in martial arts.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you just never cease to amaze us, do you?
I'm an experienced junkie. That's sort of what I like. But as we always used to talk about it in martial arts is it's just like so what happens if you're in this situation with a knife to your throat, and you said, well, how did I get there? Right. So you want to make sure that you intercept that before you get to that point. Right. The knife at the throat is the last resort. That's the few mistakes you made to get there. So I would say that in terms of making the transition is one, make sure you've got a good financial advisor along the way. Make sure you've got a nice plan, and as best you can, stick to the plan. And there are certain circumstances that are out of your control that can interfere with the plan. Layoffs, pandemics, things like that can get in the way of the plan. But as much as you control the plan, plan the work the plan, right? And then the last part of it, making the transition, is making sure that you have your landing point of what you're going to do. Too often I've seen people pull the pin in retirement and they don't have, well, what am I going to do next? And a lot of times you'll see them, no matter what age, gone in 2 years because they just, the boredom got them distressed when they didn't know what to do with themselves. And I do believe that you need to have those things going along the way before you get to that point where you're going to say to your company, hey, I'll take a buyout, or it's time for me to go. I'm going to go. And then you're sitting there going, well, what are you going to do? I mean, my wife Pamela will tell you that I'm probably just as busy as I was when I was at Accenture.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm like I said, I'm doing the videos, or I'm trying some new technology because I was in technology for a long time. So I'm always up on whatever's happening. I'm playing with new cameras. I'm playing with new recording. My guitar with my teacher, Robert Conti. I've been with Robert Conti for 3 years now, doing hardcore lessons with him. And I take lessons with him periodically because you need somebody to cry foul. You know how it is.
Yes.
You're doing the same thing with your art, right?
Yes.
You take lessons, you teach, you learn from teaching, you learn from lessons. You have people crying foul at whatever you're doing. Like I said, because sometimes you think you're really super good at something, and somebody goes, hey, what was that? My guitar teacher would do that a lot. Robert will go, what did you play there? What was that?
What was that? I know. In my art, I had a fabulous teacher up in the state of Washington, and I was painting these monkeys in a tree. And so I was concentrating on the monkeys and the leaves, and he looked at it and he said, do you know what bark looks like? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, come with me. And he took me by the arm outside where there was a tree. And he said, you stand here and you look at that tree until you figure out what that bark really looks like. Then you go back in there and paint it. I'm like, okay. So I ended up painting it, and I won an award with that picture, and they said it was because of the bark on the tree.
Right.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, you wouldn't have known if you didn't point it out.
And I thought it was all about the monkeys.
Yeah. No, it's like the same thing. When I was playing, a lot of times playing at Max, you're playing in your room and you're practicing, and the technology out there is so great now. You can have like an entire quartet with you that sounds really good, but they never make a mistake. They don't drink. They show up on time. It's awesome. But when you get out, when you get out and playing, you need the live fire. You need the interaction with the music. But it's very interesting, with the audience, getting your audience reaction. You play something you think is super cool, and the audience is like, Then you play something that you don't think is so cool, but all of a sudden grabs them, and then you're like, oh, I'll do that again. Yeah. 'Cause they got all excited.
Yeah.
And you need so you need that feedback, whether it's an instructor or whether it's even your peer group, the other musicians. I mean, that's one of the reasons I hire certain guys, because they won't yes me to death. Bar Shapiro on drums, John Bell's a guy on bass, David Siegel on keys. These are guys that'll tell me the truth.
Yes.
And I like use them.
And it goes back to that integrity thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm okay with the continuous improvement. I mean, it's like you go out there and you got something in your tooth. Hopefully your friends will tell you that you got something in your teeth, right? I mean, just don't let me stand there like an idiot.
Yeah.
So
that leads me to a question. You've been in the corporate world dealing with one kind of people. Well, I mean, all people are different, but the corporate leader type person. And now you're in the music world dealing with the creatives. Do you find them real different?
Yes. Yeah, I do think that there's a yes and no, right? So I do think that the core skills of making sure that they've got goals, that they understand what the expectations are, those things I find have been very valuable. In fact, I've even had feedback about how organized, the charts are there. Like I write all the charts, right? So all the charts are written, especially for the singers. They know what time to be there. They know what to wear. There's nothing, that I leave to chance. So they seem to appreciate that.
Right.
Where it becomes a bit of a challenge is probably more in sensitivity. Artists tend to be a little more sensitive about, or a little more. Maybe it's a little more about. I think it's inherently. Art's inherently sensitive and a little bit insecure, which leads to the being sensitive. And so sometimes I do have to watch the Tony direct, because when we did social skills, we were very busy, and we mapped people. And we did this with our clients too. So you have your driver in the one quadrant.
Right.
You've got your analytic in the other quadrant. You're expressive down here, and you're amiable. And everybody falls into some category. Some are extreme, some are more towards the middle.
Yes.
I tend to fall in the upper right-hand quadrant of driver.
Interesting you would say that, because so did I.
Yeah, and drivers tend to be very direct, especially under pressure. It's like this, right? And but you have to be careful, because as you know, with analytics thinks drivers just, they shoot from the hip, not enough data, just make decisions, whatever. And then we look at analytics, oh my God, can you make a decision, please? Right? And then we have to be careful with the amiables, because the minute we get too direct with an amiable,
they're going to cry.
they clam up, right?
Yeah.
They don't give you their best. And then of course you've got your expressive, that if you drivers like to spar with people. So if you spar with an expressive tends to take offense.
Personal.
Yeah, so you have to, as you understand the different buttons as you push, and one of our executives was very high on the flexibility score, so he could deal very well with this. I had to be very careful. What I liked about that whole social styles thing was it told me I didn't have to change, because I couldn't.
Yeah.
Right, from your third trimester to 6, what you are is what you are, and that's what you're going to be for the rest of your life. What you can understand is how your behavior affects others.
Right.
And then you manage that.
Yes.
Now that is a skill I can manage. How am I going to change? Well, I think Pamela will be the first one to tell you, no, it's not going to change. That's the way it is.
When I worked in the corporate world, especially in Africa, I was in a big media corporation in Africa, and I was the first female executive and 9,000 employees. And I'm one of those people, do this, do that, get it done, and I don't think to say, here's the reason we're going to do this, please do blah, blah, blah. And I had a lot of people take offense because I was American, because I was a woman, because I was white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had all these issues, and I really had to learn to go back and figure out how to deal with people.
Well, some of that's even generational too, because I had the same thing. I lived in China, I lived in Japan, I lived in the Philippines, and then I worked in worked in Paris, worked in Zurich, and
Oh, you were all over the world.
Worked in London. Yeah, I worked and or lived in 16 countries. But it's even generational. It starts to become that way too, because we're looking. You look at the younger people that are coming up or coming into the workforce. They tend to want to know where their work fits into the big picture. Baby boomers like me, we find it interesting, but we don't necessarily care.
Yeah.
In order to do a good job, we don't care necessarily where we fit in the big picture. It's nice to know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really drive how successful I'm going to be, because if you tell me that I need to do, kill it between there and there, then I'll do that.
You're right.
You don't need to tell me why.
Right.
But other generations, the latest generational group will want to understand where do they fit in the big picture. I mean, it's not a bad way to manage, but to your point, you've got to understand that that's what they need in order to be successful, and you need to bend, not so much bend to it, but you need to acknowledge that and give it to them if you're going to be successful.
Right. And musicians?
Musicians are the same way. I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, they need to know what's the final product going to be, what the definition of a good job is, and it has to be more than. I mean, one of the definitions of a good job, right, is did we fill the seats?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that we do very well too, is manage the marketing. Or I manage the marketing, because a lot of times when we played Maxons, we sold out every night. And I always joke around, so we don't necessarily have to be good. We just have to be we just have to fill the seats. But part of it is you don't want to you can't turn the crowd away. I think part of it is also understanding and communicating that to your musicians. What are the people like? It's really funny. I had this one friend, great guitar player. I mean, just amazing guitar player. And he used to play this place outside of DC, and it was a Thai restaurant, and this guy would go in there and he'd play, and he'd just play way above their heads though. So I happened to be there. I was working at a client in Virginia. I said, "Hey Tony, if you're down there, why don't you bring your guitar and come on over?" So I go in there, and he finally brings me up, and I said to him, he says, "What do you want to do?" I said, let's do Wave, another Joe Beam tune. So we do Wave, and everybody's like, then we do another tune out of nowhere, in which a lot of people at a certain age group will know that. And the guy was frustrated to no end. And he said to me, I don't get it. He said, I'm playing all these great tunes over here. We're playing this really great stuff. And he said, you go up there and play two tunes like that, and everybody's on their feet clearing. I said, yeah, cheering. I said to him, they can hum the tune. One piece of advice I'd gotten from Joe Puma, from Les Paul, because I played with Les Paul a couple of times, and it was that he said, no one hums your solo.
Interesting.
No one hums your solo. They want melodies. They want, and as my guitar teacher says, Robert says, every song is a memory for someone out there, and that's what you do. And if you're watching the audience, like Lou Paulo is another who's Les Paul's guitar player, mentor of mine, sat next to him for 18 years, learning from this guy. And Lou would sit in the room and he'd divide the room up in four, and he'd go, those people like Elvis, those people like Frank Sinatra, they like 50s rock and roll, and those guys, they like Italian music. We had one night where a bunch of people came in, and we did, because he was first generation Italian, we did Italian music for like an hour, because that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you care about? And I remember picking a tune. Lou had turned to me one night and said to me, "Pick a tune." I said, "Here's That Rainy Day," which is a Frank Sinatra tune. He goes, "You're playing for yourself." He goes, "Pick another one," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." But it stuck with me. It was 18 years ago. I know, probably close to almost 20 now.
Now, did he look around the room and identify that these are the kind of people that like?
He plays something, and he look for the reaction.
I see.
And so you didn't go with set list with Lou.
So he'd say, "Okay, we'll do more of that."
Exactly. He look on his. All of a sudden, he see this. Somebody look up. Somebody be tapping. Somebody be singing along. And what he would do, and because when you played with Lou, there was no set list. It was stream of consciousness, and you had the one play, name that tune, and name that key.
Yeah.
So Lou would just start playing, and then he had this phenomenal talent of, while he's finishing one song, segueing into another, not stopping and starting a tune. Boom, he'd like ooze at the next tune. There's our ooze again, and I remember, but he would then what we would do is, as his teaching to me, we would take a break, and he'd go and he'd tell me, these people like this, these people like this, these people like this music, these people want more Frank, these people want 50s doo-wop, and that's what he would do. And then the rest of the next night, then as the night would evolve, he would do it again, and then he would change based on the shift. So when you're playing clubs and you're playing these lounges and things like that, you've got to be more fluid because you don't know who's in the room. If you're Britney Spears and you've got a record, you just do your greatest hits.
Yeah.
Because that's what people want from you. They're not.
Right.
They're coming to see you. You don't have to guess what they want. You know what they want. They came to see you. But when they come into the Tuscany or the El Cortez or Tropicana, when I played there, you have an idea what you might want to start with, but the crowd will tell you what they want to hear.
Right.
And you've got to do that. And same with your clients. When you're in business too, right? You
It's
come in
called
with
customer service.
Yeah, well, or even when you're doing proposals, you have to seek to understand and be understood. Seek to be understood. And same thing with that. You go in there, you have a preconceived notion of what the client has asked for in their RFP, or request for proposal, for those of you not in the business, and then you come in there, and then you got to be able to bob and weave. And I remember I was one guy I used to work for at Accenture before I was managing director. He would make his PowerPoints very loose. So if the room went in a different direction, his PowerPoint would fit.
Yeah.
Then we had other guys that wrote a tone. It was a tone. And there, and so it was very interesting. But they were kind of locked in, right? So if the room went in a different direction, you kind of threw the PowerPoint away.
Yeah. Which
is not a bad thing either. But it's interesting. Like I said, it's that room. The room will always tell you what you need to do.
Yes.
If you listen to the room.
Yes.
Whether it's a business, whether it's in music, the client, the audience will tell you what they want to hear.
I really like that piece of advice. Listen to the room. Wow, that's good.
And I think when you go back to about folks, thank you. I think, and I wish I like to say coin. I'm going to take credit for it, but I think it's a musical thing though, because when you look at your different aspects of your life, they're not in silos. So what you learn playing guitar, you can do in business, in the corporate world, and what you learn in the corporate world, you can move over into the music world. Because it's all business. When you're playing in your room with your friends and you're kind of working on a few things, that's the art part of it. But when you're playing it from an audience, I don't care what you call it, it's business.
It is.
You're selling a product.
Yes.
And it's either the audience wants to buy it or they don't. And if they don't want to, they'll be very clear. They'll be very clear, because all of a sudden your tables start getting empty, or the chatter starts getting.
Yes, it gets louder than the music.
Yeah, and you want to be like Mundell Lowe, is one of my favorite guitar players. I remember one time we were at the Zinc Bar in New York, and he was playing, and one day he stopped. He goes, "Am I playing too loud?"
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that situation.
No. This has been wonderful. I'm sorry that it has to come to an end, because I'm really enjoying being around you and learning from you. And
thank you. I'm enjoying this too.
Having you on as a guest. Would you tell my viewing audience, or our viewing audience, how they can get in touch with you if they want to find out more about you or where you're performing?
Sure. I've got a email. So it's tpmusicllc.com. So that's my business. That's my business over there. So it's tpmusicllc.com, and
we'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, I should realize that. And then I'm responsive. I keep an eye on things. So I get back very quick. As you saw, I got back very quickly.
Oh, I know, you were great.
Yeah.
You were one of the best I've ever had. I sent you an invitation. You were like, yes.
Yeah, well, I remember the days when I was a junior person at Accenture, and we were Anderson Consulting back then, and nothing I hated more was sitting around waiting for a response.
Yes.
Yeah, and then in those days it was a little harder, right? Because you didn't have texting, and it was email or nothing, right? Back in 20 years ago, or 25 years ago. But I try to be responsive, because you don't want people waiting around.
No, and it says who you are. It says that you're efficient, that you take care of business, that you're going to show up. I mean, when somebody answers me right away, I know, okay, good, I'm dealing with a person that's pretty decisive.
Yeah, I figured you trusted me, because I didn't get another message confirming.
You didn't?
Well, I got the one that you got my email, but I usually expect like the day before somebody would say to me, "Are you sure you're coming?"
Oh.
I'm like, yeah, she trusts me.
I was thinking, well,
no, you were responsive.
Didn't I send you the address?
Yeah, no, you sent me everything. You were very responsive.
Oh.
But I said the trust that I was actually going to show up the next.
Oh no!
This is a week later.
No, I do that with some people though.
I can imagine. I do that with some of my folks too. Where
I have one this afternoon that I did that with this morning. I will see you this afternoon at such and so time, because I never received his things. So I was like, well, he did write me and say, I'm excited about being on your show, but
Well, that's
he
good.
didn't send anything. So I'm like, better remind him. But you, I didn't have to remind, because you are a professional.
I pride myself.
And I think you're a professional no matter what you're doing, whether it's in the corporate world or the music world or wherever. I get that feeling from you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me
It's
on.
been a
Really
pleasure.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that you'll be in touch with Tony Pereira, because you want to go and see him when he's performing here in town. We want to always support our fabulous local entertainers, and Tony is one of those. And join us again next week on What's Your Story?